Okay, good morning, Ed. This is James Parker. Thank you for joining my online academy. I appreciate it. So, just going through your questionnaire here, and yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Totally correlates to what I'm seeing with your golf swing. So, inconsistent ball flight pattern, not striking the ball very well, and the shot pattern that's getting you in trouble the most is a pull and a pull slice, right? So why don't we jump right into where that pull's coming from, right? So let's just stop you a little bit before impact and see how that club's coming into impact. Where you can see that club head is coming slightly underneath the plane, right? So you're attacking it a little bit too much from the inside, okay? And the reason you're attacking it too much from the inside is because you're just not opening your turns enough, right? And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth in a second, right? But you see, when you see the pros, their club heads generally, in between the two lines, let's just say, in between the two red lines, straight down to impact. And that's because as they come down to impact, if we use your hips and your shoulders as examples, they've got their shoulders pointing out the way a little bit, and their hips turned out the way a little bit. Whereas you've got your shoulders still pointing off there to the right, your hips are about at zero. And you can see there how your forearms are pointing off to the right as well, right? So you haven't opened your turns enough, right? That's the best way of terming it, right? You haven't opened your turns enough, or your turns are still too closed. So therefore, we're attacking the ball from the inside, and then one of the patterns you see with decent players is if they don't open their turns enough, then through impact that club head gets past their hands and the club head starts to whip over, right? So you can see there just how much that club face is whipped over. Very evident sort of as the club exits, you can see how much that club head's turned over as well, right? The shaft is coming out above your left shoulder, right, which is another indication that you haven't turned very much, right? The guys that generally don't turn very much have the shaft coming out above their left shoulder. The pros, excuse me, the pros have the club coming out underneath their left shoulder. That's the exit point. And also the face generally hasn't turned over like yours has, right? So shaft's coming too high. That tells me the path has come into the ball too much from the inside, and the club face is whipping over. Right. So there's the major problem. That's why it's going left. Okay. So there's a few other things going on as well, which I wanna point out. I mean, you're complaining of not striking the ball very well. So let's talk about that first and foremost. And you can see how as you come down, how that club head is very close to the ground, at least sort of 3 or 4 inches before the ball, right? So if we look at where you are at impact and how you get into impact, and what I'm particularly looking at are your centers, your body centers, right? So your center of your shoulders, the center of your hips, and you're 75, so I'm not going to tell you to try and turn more and try and get that left shoulder more under your chin and get your back more facing the target. At the moment, your back's kind of pointing over here somewhere, isn't it, instead of your back facing the target. So I don't particularly want to tell you to do anything like that, but one thing you definitely could do is, particularly because you've been playing golf for a really long time, is you can try and get your hips more over your left foot at impact, right? So So what I'm seeing here is the hips haven't moved laterally enough. They definitely haven't turned enough. We know that, but they haven't moved laterally enough either. And you can see as you come down just how you've got this right foot on the ground as well. The pros have got the only part of their right foot that's touching the ground is the inside of their big toe at impact, right? So you've got to move your hips more. You've got to get your center of your hips more over your left foot at impact, and that's just shifting your weight forward more, right? So that's the that's the thing that we change with regards to your low point. Now the path. Let me get rid of these circles. The path, right? What we just talked about, the path. That club head's coming down a little bit too much from the inside. It's coming down from the inside because we're not turning our hips and shoulders enough. Okay, you turn your hips and your shoulders more so that at P7 there, your hips are slightly out the way, your shoulders are slightly turned out the way. Just to give you a reference point when you set up, let's say your hips and your shoulders are at 0, right? And then at impact, you want to have turned them out the way. Well, the pros have them out the way about 30 odd degrees, hips and shoulders, right? Some more than others, some less than others. But as a general sort of reference point, as a general pattern, you could say about 30 degrees open with the hips and shoulders, and you can see you're nowhere near that, right? So we got to turn more, you got to turn harder, and that will get the path coming down less from the inside, right? Less from the inside, and that also will help your face to path relationship, right? Like I said, that club face is whipping over, and you can really tell it on the left side there, right? So you can really tell it just post impact. Look how much that club face has whipped over now already, right? So that's a lot of rotation. Okay. That right wrist is breaking down, right? But the right wrist is breaking down because, just to give you an idea, the right wrist, we want to stay bent this way. Your right wrist is breaking down this way, okay? But what I'm saying is that's a common sort of pattern you find when you're not turning out the way enough of it. Okay, that club face is generally going to whip over, and you're going to hit the ball left. Definitely start the ball left. So face to path relationship, that's one of your problems. How are we gonna change that? Well, to start with, the root cause, we need to open our turns more, right? At impact, we need to turn your hips more and turn your shoulders more. Okay. So how would we, if you were going to come and spend an hour or two on the range with me, how would we go about changing it? Well, I definitely wouldn't, because of your age and the length of time you've been playing. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd want you to turn your shoulders a little bit more. You can see your shoulders have only turned about that much. I'd like to get your shoulders more, sort of closer to 90 degrees of turn, in a perfect world. But you're 75. I'm not going to ask you to do something that you possibly can't do. But I think what you definitely could do is make a better pass at it coming down, right? So we want to just work on being more aware and practicing slow motion drills of exactly where we want to be at impact, right? So let's talk about P7 first, which is impact, right? So we'll stop you there on the left. We'll pull Mac O'Grady up on the right, and we'll do the same with him. Draw some lines next to left ear, right? Tells us what our head's doing, if our head's moving, and a red line next to each hip. We'll draw a circle for the center of his shoulders, a circle for the center of his hips. Now if we stop him at P7, right, Watch where his hips are going. Right. So if we look at belt buckle, now his belt buckle's about there. Right, your belt buckle's around here somewhere, right? So your belt buckle hasn't got anywhere near that front red line. And then at P, like I said, the only part of the right foot is the inside of your right toe touching the ground, right? Right heel's off the ground. So let's say there. So let's say center of his hips now is sort of around here. I'll draw a straight line down from there, and we're talking sort of, in line with his left heel, right? And then we stop at P8, which is right arm parallel with the ground, right? And now we've got our right pocket, so we've turned even more. We've got our right pocket over our left foot now, right? And then we stop you at P8, and you can see your right pocket is about there, right? So this is what I mean by not only increasing the rotation, but also the lateral movement of the hips as well. You've got to get your hips. You've got to understand where we've got to be first and foremost. So these are the awareness drills, and then making a pass at it, slow motion, hitting short shots first. Practicing it with your wedges, and then just making a better pass at it coming down. So you can see your right heel comes off the ground there, but we're already at P8, right? I want your right heel off the ground when you're at P6, when you're down to here, right, just before you hit it. So your hips have got to move forward more, and your hips have got to be turning more. So I would just replicate those two positions. Get yourself in a mirror, get your camera out like you're doing right there at the range, and just practice these positions in a static position first, right? So hips have got to be more over our left foot, right? Your center of your hips are about there. I want the center of your hips more over your left foot. And your right pocket, right? Your right pocket, which at the moment is here, I want your right pocket over your left foot at P8, right? Which would be about there, okay? Down the line, the best way of thinking about it at P7, right there, is we want hips out the way and shoulders out the way, right? That's what I mean by 30 odd degrees turned out the way, right? So at the moment your shoulders are still pointing out to the right. Your hips have got back to about 0, so you've turned your hips a little bit more than your shoulders, but you can see still nowhere near the amount that we want, right? And that's, so I would practice that at impact, and then obviously by P7 is impact, and then obviously by P8, when we start to see the club come out, if you turn more, you'll start to see the club come out underneath your left shoulder, right? You turn more, you start to see these pros, the club exits underneath the left shoulder, okay? The better you turn, the club exits lower, right? And this would be your starting point to control the club face, right? You don't turn, you don't open your turns. You're always gonna flip that club face through impact. The club face is gonna turn over and get past your hands through impact and just post impact there, right? You want to hit good golf shots. You want to feel as though your hands are always leading the club head. Okay, you never want to feel as though that club head is whipping past your hands, and you're going to feel that if you don't open your turns enough. I think that's the best way of explaining it. So that's how I would go about implementing the changes. I would practice static positions at 7 and 8, right? And understand where you want to be first. Get in a mirror, get your camera out like you're doing, and understand where you want to be to build up the feeling. And then I would practice your swing in slow motion. I would practice it in slow motion, practicing the correct sequence, right? So if we put these lines back. So what we're seeing is, as you start down, there's hip slide. You can see the hips sliding, right? But what I'm seeing is the left knee kind of stay kicked in this way, right? Your left knee never really gets out past your left ankle. Now, if we put, because we're using Mac as an example, draw those lines again. When he starts down, you watch how that left knee now gets out past his left ankle there, right? So this is the pushing down part in your foot, right? This is then going to create the correct sort of kinematic sequence, right? It all starts from the ground. You want to turn harder. You want to open your turns more. You've got to create some kind of a connection with the ground, right? You've got to push down into the ground and allow the ground to push back up through your body, right? And I mean push down into the ground under this foot, under the lead foot, right? As you push down under this lead foot to start the downswing, that knee is going to start moving laterally, right? And then that gets your hips turning, right? So the more you can get this left knee going, that then allows your the left hip to come round. That right hip's going to follow it, right? Because the knee's moving laterally, the hips are going to move more laterally, so you're going to get over your lead foot more, right? So I would then, once you practice P7 and P8 in slow motion and static positions, I would then work on your sequence coming down, right? And what I'm seeing with the pros, and I've got Mac up because he's just such a great example of how we want to do it, right? So, you can see there how his knee at P5, his left knee's outside of his ankle, right? Whereas you at P5, your left knee still kind of kicked in this way, right? And then at P6, still kind of kicked in. At P6, look at his left leg is now that way. So I would work on that, the pushing down under the lead foot, the movement of the left knee, getting the left knee out in front of your ankle, and I would practice that in slow motion as well, right? Again, with wedges, slow motion drills, hitting the ball out there 50 yards, and just get used to that new movement pattern and see if you can practice that sort of sequence and see if you can then sync it up with how it felt when you're practicing the P7 and the P8 static positions, right? Just to build your awareness. So, just to surmise what we're trying to do at P8, we want the hips and the shoulders almost turned 90 degrees, right? You can see Mac there is just shy of 90 degrees. At P8, you're nowhere near the amount of turn that we want. Okay, so that's where we'd start, mate. Practice those things. If you have any questions or comments, just shoot me over an email. Thanks, Sid.